Joining us now, Congressman Rob Wittman, Republican 1st District, Virginia, represents the Fredericksburg area along with the Virginia's Neck, and he is also the chairman of the subcommittee on Sea Power Readiness, although it has a much longer title. That's the acronym we give it. And he's joining us now. Congressman Rob Wittman, great to have you with us.
Good morning, John. Great to be with you.
So, Congressman, I'm kind of fired up about this Trump compromise. So, look, I talked to the White House last night. I talked to Stephen Miller, and he really wanted me to emphasize today that this is not a change in the position of the president on DACA or amnesty. And I know that, some of the hardliners are calling him Amnesty Don. Here's what he said. We have to get 60 votes in the Senate. McConnell is not going to change the rule for the 60-vote cloture. And so this compromise is designed at getting 60 votes in the U.S. Senate and getting it through Congress so the president can sign something to finally fix immigration. And so 1.8 million DACA, there's 800,000 DACA applicants now that have a pathway to citizenship. He's sweetening the pot, saying there's another million out there that haven't applied. He'll go with them. But in order to do that, ending chain migration as we know it today, the only chain is going to be your spouse that might not be here or a minor child. No cousins, no aunts, no grandma. That's all gone. No siblings. And then getting rid of the visa lottery. And then along with that, he wants $30 billion for southern and northern border security, 25 in a lockbox, if you will, for the wall. Without that, no deal. What do you think?
Well, John, I think it addresses many of the major issues that a lot of us have concerns about, and that is border security. That absolutely has to happen. Without that, you do not fix the problem. It just continues. The same with ending the visa lottery program. That just doesn't make sense. People across the United States believe the same thing, that we ought to fix that. And the same with with the visa lottery, chain migration. Both of those things are illogical. There ought to be a merit-based systems for folks to come in. Other nations do that. We should do the same. We certainly, with our nation, invite people with skills that can improve our nation to come in. That ought to be the basis of our system. With looking at the individuals that are here, we ought to look at the conditions under which they'd be at least qualified for a path to citizenship. So I'll be interested to see what those conditions are, because I want to make sure that indeed, there is a threshold that people have to meet. That is they have to have no criminal history, nothing there that puts them askew of the law, or in other situations where they may not be doing things that are in the best interest of their community. We want to make sure that this is actually rewarding people for good behavior. So I look forward to seeing the details of that, about what that pathway to citizenship is. But the president, as you said, is trying to find a way to be able to get this done, and the basis of that has to be to get 60 votes in the Senate. So I think the elements to make sure that this is a permanent solution, that this doesn't create a situation where people continue to come in the country illegally, or that there's a situation where the system of immigration in our nation doesn't lead to what we all have seen in the past it has. I mean, you go back to the turn of the century, where it leads to a system that actually helps the nation overall. That's what we need. That's what we want. And we want to make sure, too, that we don't have a situation where we find ourselves 10 years from now with another wave of illegal immigration that's happened in the previous 10 years that we have to deal with. And you go back to Ronald Reagan, when they came up with a deal then. He and Tip O'Neill came up with a deal to deal with folks that were here illegally, and essentially granted them amnesty and said, well, listen, we'll do all the other stuff that would stem the flow of illegal immigrants later, and later never came. So this is an effort by the president to say, no, we're going to do all those things now. We're going to make sure that we address the root cause of people being here illegally, and make sure that 10 years down the road, we don't find ourselves in the same situation, having to deal with folks that have bypassed the law in coming here to the United States.
Well, I think you nailed it, Congressman. Look, we have been around and around this thing, and I said in the opening, This dates back to Jimmy Carter trying to do something. They just can't get it done. Carter couldn't do it. Nixon couldn't do it. Ford couldn't do it. Reagan couldn't do it. From Reagan we got was amnesty. He never got anything out of it. There was never a change in the law. George Bush 1 tried to do it. George Bush 2 had the Gang of 8 or Gang of 6, whatever that was. He couldn't get that done. I remember going to an event in Georgia with Saxby Chambliss, who was part of the amnesty thing that George Bush 2 wanted to do, and it was a convention, like the annual Georgia convention, and he got booed, Saxby Chambliss got booed off the floor. I mean, they couldn't get it done. Bill Clinton couldn't get it done. Obama couldn't get it done. Nobody can get this done. Here's what Trump has said. Look, I got to fix the law, and in doing that, I'm going to get rid of chain migration, which basically is the Democrats' long-term plan for power in perpetuity. I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to get rid of the visa lottery that makes no sense. There's no argument for that. That people that are unskilled, no education, whatever, they have no reason to be in the United States. They don't contribute anything. Half of them end up on welfare. That's gone. They're going to get rid of that. And then they're going to get the money to actually secure the border and enforce the laws that we have, including E-Verify. Now, the president's saying, if this is not in the bill, there's no deal. I'm not going to sign it. He has to sign it. And it's got to get through the House. It's got to get through the Senate with 60. And so the compromise position for that is we're going to take 1.8 million of these so-called DACA recipients, DACA applicants, 700,000, and another 1.1 million that have not applied but fit the category. But they'll be vetted, right? No crimes, no fraud, no bad stuff. They have to have an education. They're all going to be looked at. That's what the application process was for in the first place. So you're getting a deal. There's a compromise. But to me, Congressman, I'm in favor of this, and I'll tell you why. It fixes the problem long term, right? That's really what you're after. Fix the problem that we haven't been able to change. And if you do that, then I think the trade-off is worth it. What about you?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, John, as far as this has to be a long-term solution. So that's what I'm going to be looking for with this. I know the president will come out with the details of this plan on Monday. And, of course, his threshold is needing 60 votes in the Senate. We'll be obviously looking at the proposal in the House to see what comes out of the Senate. But, those key elements to make sure that we are addressing the underlying symptoms of the problem that we find ourselves in today and make sure that it doesn't reoccur. And I think most Americans are in favor of that, saying, listen, these are all reasonable ways for us to go about that. But we want to make sure that we are not going down the road of not solving the problem. That to me is the key element with this. I think people look at this and say, the children of those folks that have come here illegally, shouldn't be held accountable for the sins of their parents. But we have to make sure that this is fixed in the long term, where this doesn't continue, to make sure that we have ways to fix the current system. And in addition to this, John, it's not just these DACA kids, but it's also what are we going to do to make sure that the system that we have for people coming into the country is a thoughtful and logical system. Now, getting rid of the visa lottery is a good step in that direction. Getting rid of chain migration is a good step in that direction. Coming up with a system to say, here are the conditions under which we will accept people to come into this country. Remember, coming to this country is not a right. It's a privilege, and we want to make sure we reflect on it like other countries do. You go to a country like Australia. You can't immigrate to Australia unless they have defined a need for you as an individual and your skills to be there, and that's not unreasonable. I think for folks to expect to be reflected in our system. So I think all those things are good things. I think this moves the conversation in the right direction, and that is to fix these fundamental problems that I think everybody is in favor of addressing. Now, then it gets down to the details about, well, how do you do that, and how do you make sure that indeed the elements of this are a long-term solution? It's good that the president comes out with where he stands on this, because I think both the House and the Senate need to know that, so that as they deliberate legislation, they know what and what will not be signed by the president. That is a key element to getting something through successfully, so you're not negotiating on something and then find out where the president says that he would veto that, then you're back to square one.
I mean, that is so true, what you just said. I mean, I've got, some of our calls today are upset. They don't like amnesty. They think the president went back on his word. Breitbart, which, by the way, I deleted that app when I got into it with Steve Bannon over some of the comments he made to Michael Wolff. Breitbart today in a headline calling him Amnesty Don. But look, again, Congressman, Stephen Miller, who's a great friend of mine, and I trust him, told me yesterday, John, this has nothing to do with the president's position, okay? He simply doesn't have 60 votes in the Senate to get this done. So we have to compromise on something. And this to the president seems like a reasonable way to solve this. Might not get everything you want, but you have to deal in the political reality, right? So if he can get this done, and what he said is, look, and a lot of people are saying, well, so it's going to get watered down. We're going to get the amnesty, and then we're not going to get $25 billion. We're not going to get rid of chain migration. We're not going to get rid of, well, then he isn't going to sign it, right? So, I mean, he still has to sign it. It's not like he can shake somebody's hand and then they go back on it, right? He has to sign the bill. And if those provisions aren't there, Congressman, he's not going to sign it. It's going to get vetoed, and we're back to square one, right?
No, John, that's it. I mean, I think everybody, House and Senate, have to feel confident that this is a long-term solution to the problem. I know that's what I'm going to be looking for. And is it fair in how it implements those things for those DACA kids that are here? And when I say fair, that is, making sure it's fair in relation to how the law currently treats folks. And if it doesn't do that, then yes, it will have problems. So we have the ability to look at this. Remember, there'll be debate back and forth. I'm sure there'll be some changes to it along the way. But I think the measure is, if this doesn't address it long term, if it doesn't create border security, if it doesn't stop the illogical ways that immigration is occurring right now that creates the problem that we have with people here illegally, then it shouldn't pass, because the American people expect this effort to be about solving the problem in the long term. And that's everybody. I don't care where you're on the political spectrum. I mean, this ought to be about solving the problem that we have before us right now. And there's a potential to do that. And you're right, there is going to have to be some give and take there. And, when in a typical compromise, not everybody gets what they want. But I think there's certain fundamental elements that certainly we look at and say this has to be contained in the bill, or, as you said, the president won't sign it.
That's the bottom line. He isn't going to sign it, and so it's got to be a thing that works. And I can't wait to see what the Democrats are going to say in attempting to reject this. I really am looking forward to their response, because, Congressman, look at it this way, right? So let's take Chuck Schumer, for example, or any of your House Democratic colleagues that have been jumping up and down saying, we got to do something for the kids, and it's not fair to the kids, and it's all about the kids and DACA. And now the president says, okay, I'm going to take care of the kids and give them a pathway to stay in the United States and be citizens, and I'm even going to one-up you and go for another million of them that were too afraid to apply. So I'm going to solve the problem for the kids. Now, if your Democratic interests were really about the kids, then you would take this deal. If the kids were just a political pawn for you to continue to let illegals come into the country unabated and get chain and visa lottery migrants in, because your real goal was just to get more votes and power in perpetuity from people coming into the country illegally and under these immigration policies that get on the dole and then vote Democratic, now you're exposed. I don't know what Schumer is going to say. I don't want border security. I don't want laws. I don't want people in the country that can contribute to society? I mean, what the hell are they going to say? I can't wait to see the response.
Well, the American people are pretty clear in wanting a thoughtful, logical immigration system that's fair, and
That's right.
the visa lottery is not a logical way to go
Makes
about
no sense.
any type of system of immigration, and neither is chain migration. And the
Congressman,
American people, I think, overwhelmingly say,
You're right.
Fix it. That doesn't make sense.
So I got to go. It's going to be interesting to see what the Democrats say. You're going to be right in the middle of it, just like Congressman you always are. Congressman Rob Wittman. More information, go to whitman.house.gov, whitman.house.gov.